Hello, everybody. My name is Holly Bunn, and this is the session Grant Strategy Suggestions. I want to say thank you to NTSA for inviting me to do this session, and thanks to all of you for joining. I think that many people are beginners to grant writing or development or the nonprofit world or residential services for survivors. So if you're not a beginner, hopefully still there will be something in here that you can learn. And my hope for everybody is that you'll walk away after this session knowing a little bit more than you did in the beginning. I was asked to do a session called Grant Tips and Tricks, and I ended up retitling it to Strategy Suggestions because after thinking through what tips and tricks do I know, and really that just turned into how do I do grants for my organization, and then I just came up with some pretty basic suggestions for how to do this and the way that I do it. And so hopefully some of it is helpful to you. And again, you learn something new. So a little bit about where I work. I'm the Chief Development Officer at the Well House, and that is what you're looking at here. This is our campus. We're in St. Clair County, Alabama. And the Well House has been around for 11 years this year. And we serve survivors through 5 different phases. The first is partnering to help with rescue. And then we have a trauma center on our campus, and then a short-term home called the Immediate Shelter, a long-term home called Next Steps to Freedom, and transitional living apartments called Next Steps to Independence. Over the last 11 years, we've served over 500 survivors, I think somewhere around 550. And we just opened our home for minors called Well House Child, or we just finished constructing our home, Well House Child, and hope to be opening it very, very, very soon. Like I said, I'm the Chief Development Officer, which I do fundraising and awareness for the Well House. Absolutely love my role and my team, and certainly the women that live at the Well House. And I've been there for 2 years and 4 months since April of 2019. I was new to development when I started and have learned a ton about development and also about grant writing, which is a piece of the fundraising part of what me and my team do. And recently I started contracting to help write grants for an organization called NTSA, and I very much enjoyed working with them, and have gained a little bit of a new perspective in doing that. So excited about that. So let's get started. The first thing I wanted to talk about was having a strategic approach when it comes to grants and grant writing. We at the Well House have a development strategy that we refresh and rethink every year. And within that is a piece which is the grants and grants writing. And there really is a little bit of a strategy when it comes to grants and making applications to different foundations as well. My team, the development team at the Well House, we work with what I call private foundations, or private funding, which just really to me means it's not federal funding. We do apply to and receive federal funding at the Well House, and are very grateful for that. And that is a portion of our income and covers a portion of our expenses. And so the development team does everything else, all grants outside of that. And so we work with several different kinds of foundations, and I've listed them here. Family foundations, community, or you could call it local foundations. Um, Church foundations, usually tied to larger churches, and then corporate foundations tied to companies, and and sometimes is their way of their philanthropic giving. Some are small and some are big, and that's really in reference to their budgets and what the kinds of money that they're able to give. And then there's some crossover between the two, like sometimes a family foundation kind of turns more into a community foundation over time, and they've started a trust, and then it grows and grows and turns into a larger, like, local or community foundation, still with that family name and funding initiatives that that family started out wanting to fund, but maybe now they're governed by a board and have a broad and big reach. So the strategic approach to grant writing that we do is really just being intentional about who you're asking for what, so that middle way, or 3/4 of the way through a year, you don't get stuck kind of not knowing what dollar amounts you're going to ask to what foundations that might fund something very specific. It's good to kind of know that on the front end. It's going to take a lot more time and work and research on the front end, but doing so just gives you a good game plan and helps you to keep in mind in the beginning, months of a year, what will be coming later. So the way that we do it is research. We're constantly researching for new and additional and different foundations that may fund what we're doing. So that's ongoing. Or if you're a new organization just starting out in development or grants, then you'll want to research as your first step. And it's just, to me, it's a lot of Googling. There are different platforms out there that help you find grants. There's Grant Station and Grant Gopher. Currently, we don't use either of those. And I'll say that when I started at the Well House, there was already a good base that the Well House had going. And so I walked into a good situation, and I've just been building upon what was already there. But if you're new, you definitely will want to do the search, and then just list out the people that you feel like are a good fit and want to fund your mission, and then order those by deadline. And then right next to that deadline is, what do they fund? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But then at the same time, you'll look at your organizational budget and the expenses that you're going to have coming up in the next year. Break that down as granularly as you can, and see where are the matches. Where do certain things that you are already planning to do, or really almost positive that you will do. And when I say that, I mean, sometimes people look at grant writing as if we get this grant, then we'll put this thing into practice. And that's not necessarily wrong or bad. Just in my experience, writing an application for what you definitely will be doing is a lot better for you long term when and if you are awarded that funding, rather than being awarded funding and then it is something that you must do, but maybe by the time you're awarded, it's not something that you actually is a priority for you anymore. So match those things that you do plan to do with what people will fund. And then at the end, you're deciding who you're going to ask for what amount and for what project. And throughout the course of the year, obviously things may change. Your priorities may change, and that's okay. But at least you have done the work on the front end, and you know what funders are going to fund, and you can still adjust your plans within those parameters. So for grants management, we at the Well House, or I, am not yet very fancy. I like to be organized, and the way that I manage grants currently is what I call a grants tracker, which is again not fancy, and it is a spreadsheet. And these are the headers in the spreadsheet. So this is the data that I'm tracking for every foundation, every grant and application. And I like having it in all one place so that I can compare them to each other and see all the information at once. And so these are the headers and the information that I'm tracking. The name of the foundation, who owns it. At the Well House, I and my CEO, we both have different grant applications that we do. So who's responsible on your team for that application? And then what's the deadline? We touched on that already. The application type, I'll talk about that in a minute. What do they fund? Do they have a dollar amount cap? What will you ask for? Literally the dollar amount, and for what project? The status after you've submitted your application. And for that, I just put to do if it's upcoming, pending if I've submitted, declined if it gets declined, or awarded and the amount if awarded. And then response date. So some foundations will put on their website and in their information when you can expect a response, and some don't. And some, if you have a relationship year over year, you may start to just know about when you'll hear back. And so that information you want to put in there. It's just nice to have an idea of when will you be awarded, but also when will the money actually come in the door. Their website, any login information, if that's the way that the application works, and then any notes. And so here's a picture of what my tracker looks like. Again, not very fancy, but it works for me right now. There are, again, different platforms out there that capture this information for you and integrate probably with your other tools, online tools that you use. I just haven't gotten there yet. And our CRM that we use, or donor management system that we use, doesn't quite capture all of this information. I'm actually talking with them about it, hoping that they'll build it out to where they do and that I can use it along with everything else. But for now, this in conjunction with my calendar is the way that I track grants. And so this is our 2021 tab. And another good thing about having it in a spreadsheet is that I have a 2020 tab and a 2019 tab. And so you can just copy over the information year over year and change it as needed. The color coding on the left that you see, that's like the foundations. So I make it green if we're awarded. My yellow mustard color is declined, and the teal color is pending or submitted, done, pending. The other thing I'll do with funds coming up soon is highlight it in like a salmon or red color, which I actually don't have those that are coming up soon highlighted, but it would be normally. So that's what our tracker looks like. That's how I organize them. So a few of those headers put on a few slides coming up just to talk a little bit more about them and give a little more suggestions. To me, the deadline and the type of application go hand in hand, because knowing what it is that the work that you're going to have to do and put in for whatever the application is, helps you keep track of when you need to be working on it and be complete to get it in by the submission deadline. I put all those deadlines on my calendar, and sometimes a week or two before, I'll put a reminder to start working or be working or get close to finishing up with that particular grant. There are so many different application types, so many different formats. Every single foundation that we submit an application to has a different format, the way that they want it. So it's never the same, although some tend to ask the same questions, which is good. So it could be, we have a few foundations that we just write a letter, a one-page business request proposal letter, and we talk about what we've got going on and what it is that we're requesting funding for and how much, and say thank you. And that's all that they want. So just email that letter directly to whoever is working with grants in that foundation. Some do a proposal with attachments, which is kind of like a cover letter. Maybe they've got their own application form that you need to fill in, and that's your proposal. And then they'll give you a list of different attachments that they want behind your proposal. Those attachments could be a list of your board members, a list of other funding sources that you have. It could be usually your 501c3 paperwork, maybe, definitely your budget, either your organizational budget or your project budget for whatever you're requesting. Sometimes people ask for a 990 or an audit, always just depends, or financial statements from your previous year. So they're going to want to see a picture of your financials for sure in some way or another. And then something about what you're requesting and you giving details about that. Some foundations have an online form where just right on their website, they've got the fields that you fill in. And some have an online portal where you'll set up an account and answer their questions and then upload attachments through that portal. Some have then kind of an extensive process where you'll do a letter of inquiry or intent, which could sometimes be within that online portal. And it's just a series of maybe like 5 questions. So it's a short, small application. And then if you make it through that round, they'll invite you to submit a longer second application, more intense, and give more detail. Some people want an interview in Zoom or in person after they've read and gone through your application. And then some people will do a site visit to come and see your operations. What I do with these applications and the way that I organize them is I have a folder for every different foundation on my computer. And so all of the attachments, and or if it's just the letter or whatever pieces that go into that application, I'm saving in that folder. And then for whatever year it is that I'm submitting. And if it's an online form or the online portal, I actually will copy and paste each question into a document so that we, the organization, have a record of that full application. And because just so that we know what was asked and what the response was, and we have it in one place, rather than somebody having to go log into every different account. So that's just a way that I do it. And I do have, sometimes we have interns and they help with that copying, pasting process. The other thing that I wanted to mention was my writing process, which I don't talk about a ton in other slides in here. So I want to touch on it here. and say that the way that I work is I'll read through an application and gather those questions and see what are they asking for, what information do they want, um, and then what attachments do they want. And then I will go talk to my team, my programming team, operations, my CEO, um, whoever is involved with the project or program or request that I'm writing. Whatever people are actually doing that work or going to be the ones implementing the work, those are the ones that have the most information about it. And so I'll gather their words and their goals and how they're going to measure success and all the different questions that are asked for, and take notes. And then I go sit down at a separate time and put that into responses to application questions. On average, I would say that a grant would take me about 4 hours. And that is very much an average, because some, you see, if it's a letter, that might take just an hour to put together and polish and submit, and from beginning to end. But a big online portal application, that might take many more hours than 4, maybe 8, maybe 10. But I would say on average, out of all the grants that we submit all year long, and we submit about 40, that it might take about 4 hours from start to finish per grant. Definitely an average. So then what do foundations fund? These are just examples that I actually took straight from my tracker. These are examples of what foundations that we apply to will fund. And our favorite for sure is operations. Anybody that will fund your general operations is wonderful, because you get to talk about your organization as a whole, and the dollars that come in can really go to anything in your whole budget, including staffing. Some people want to fund a project or a program, a new initiative, something brand new that you haven't started, that you need funding to do, a one-time need. Some foundations have different pillars within their funding goals. So it could be things that are unrelated, like, arts and culture, the environment, and education, and health and human services. So some foundations out there have different avenues that they fund, and your organization's mission or purpose, or a program that you're doing within your organization, could fit in one of those pillars, but not all. And some want you to choose what you're applying for. Obviously, in our work, there are foundations out there that fund anti-trafficking initiatives, ministries, housing, residential, health and medical, education, women, children. These are just examples, but definitely you want to be sure that you read everything on a foundation's website, everything that they've published about eligibility, about what they fund, and many will list what they do not fund. And so that's super helpful as well. And you just want to really make sure that the request that you're making is a good fit with what they want to fund. And typically, I feel like having a broader funding request on your end is better than maybe too specific, unless their funding eligibility or requirement or what they want to fund is super specific. Then you match that up. Be sure to look for a dollar amount cap and don't ask for over that. And definitely call and ask. I have found at first, when I started out writing grants, I thought that there was this big wall between us and the foundation, and that this was a very formal process, and you just couldn't talk to them. And it was like, do this great application, just hope that they're going to approve it, which it is sometimes a formal process, but many foundations are out to do good and help people and create long lasting change for your organization, for the people that you help. And so they really are wanting to help. And I have found that asking all kinds of questions to foundations or whoever it is that represents the grant making piece of a foundation, those people really do want to help guide you in your request making. And so definitely reach out if you have a question about the fit, and don't waste your time writing a big, huge application that they come back and say, we don't fund what you're asking for, because that is frustrating. And there are lots of things to be spending your time on. So definitely call if in doubt about the fit. So our request, this is talking about what you decide to ask a particular foundation for and how much. I get that question a lot. And there are definitely so many different variables that go into the right number to ask for. And here are the ones that I have included. Looking into that foundation's size and how much they have to give, knowing that information definitely helps inform your ask amount. Checking to see who have they funded in the past and how much have they given to those organizations is great information to know. You can see the low end and the high end of the amounts of gifts they've given. And maybe if it's your first time to ask, be someplace in the middle for them. Definitely is okay to apply to multiple foundations for the same project. I would say that if you had something that was going to cost $50,000, that you could apply to 3 or 4 different foundations and ask for $25,000 each. Then just throwing out easy math numbers, but basically definitely okay to ask different people for the same request, knowing that maybe 1 and 2 are going to award you depending on your success rate. And many foundations will ask you the question, what other sources of funding do you have already for this project? And what sources of funding do you think you might have? Like, who else have you asked? Because most foundations do not want to be your sole funder for whatever project it is that you're asking for. They want to know that your organization is sustainable and that your development model is sound and that there are other people contributing and going to keep you afloat, and they're not the only ones doing that. We would say that 10 to 30,000 is usually a good amount for a first time request. That definitely depends on the size of the foundation. That is probably for like your normal solid foundation. Anybody smaller, then you probably would want to make a smaller request. Some foundations offer multi-year funding, so you could ask for 90,000 over the next 3 years, and that would mean 30 a year for the next 3 years. Those are wonderful requests to ask for and be awarded for obvious, long-lasting and sustainable funding. But those who do not offer that, foundations are a great funding source, because in our experience, when they invest in you, they are investing in your mission and they want to know about it and they want to know what your outcomes are. and they will stay with you year over year, to where you just kind of they end up like a donor, that you cultivate a relationship with, and that, yes, there is this application process and you follow it, and their deadline is September 1st every single year. But you can come back the next year and they will have known what good things happened, what their money went to, and how lives were changed because of it. And then you come back with a new and a different request. If it's somebody who funds general operations, you just tell them more about your organization, how it's grown as a whole. And that is your opportunity to increase your request year over year. So maybe you start with a $10,000 request, which is a nice gift for sure if you're awarded. And then next year you raise that to $15,000 request, and on and on. When in doubt about the dollar amount, call and ask. Some people won't tell you. Some people will say, ask for what you need. And so then ask for what you need. But definitely some people will be very open with you about even a range that they could be able to grant you. Board involvement has been really important with the Well House and grants, and they've been a huge help to us. So I would definitely suggest getting your board involved when it comes to grants, to have them help you research and prospect different foundations. That would be good. Boards typically are well-connected members of the community, and they probably have an idea of different foundations that are out there just by nature of who they know and who they've got in their circles, professionally or personally. So definitely boards are super helpful when it comes to building that initial list, and then definitely helpful with, again, connecting. We have people on the Well House board who know people on different foundation boards and have known them for a long time. And so we'll make our application, submit it by the deadline, and then just have our board member touch base. And that board member will just, put a little, plant a seed, or be the bird in the ear, and just remind their friend who's on the board of that foundation that, hey, we submitted this application for our counseling program. We're trying to improve in this way, and we just really appreciate your support. And that goes a long way. And then connecting after you're awarded as well, getting your board members to write thank yous and to make thank you phone calls. That's huge. Okay, so just a couple other suggestions that I have to give. I've said this actually already, but treat your foundations like donors. They are people too. And, there are different people on the board, or executive director, or grants manager, whoever it is that is the representative. But definitely sending a text or a call, or definitely thank you cards after awarded, can really go a long way. And be sure to, if you are awarded, add any reporting dates to your calendar, and don't miss those. And something that we do that helps as well, in addition to turning in whatever grant report they require, is adding them to your communications list. Any communications, if they say it's okay. But definitely we send a quarterly update, just a letter that we write with bullet points of what's new, what's been going on, and what are our partners helping us to accomplish every quarter. So first, and then we send a mid-year update, and then a third quarter update, and then an end of year letter. But we add our foundations to receive those for sure, because they really are, in the end, a donor too. And then the last thing I guess I wanted to just leave with you is about the writing process, because I didn't talk too much about that. I think I talked about my process in gathering information, but when you're writing, certainly you want to use, academic and clear language. Um, it's sometimes less is more, and being very direct is the best way to go. There's usually a word limit or character limit on what you're allowed to say. But remember, these people are reading probably tons and tons of different requests, and so keeping it clear and precise and not using a whole bunch of flowery language is our approach. And definitely be yourself. Talk about the organization that you are rather than the one that you want to be, because in your reporting and what actually happened with their funding, they're going to see that. That's important. And then my last suggestion is, after you read and reread their website and the language that they use, reuse some of the foundation's language in your request. Everybody kind of likes to hear things put in their speak, and I have found that works. And it without, it seems obvious, but it's just a way to prove that what you're asking for is completely aligned with what they want to give to. So that is, I think, my last suggestion. And here's my contact information. Again, my name's Holly, and that's my email and my phone number. I'm happy to answer any additional questions of things that I forgot to talk about. I really hope that this was helpful to somebody. And if there is anything else about grants that I can help you with, then I'd be happy to try. So thank you, everybody, for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.